My name is Sanat Biswal, also known as the Accountant Guy, and today in this video we are going to learn how you can utilize this travel expense tracker to keep track of all your travel expenses and plan ahead. So first of all, we have got a summary section under which we have the accounts, the expenses, and the overall summary of all the expenses. So first of all, we will set up the different expenses that we are going to incur under the accounts view. So here I have classified the expenses under travel, meals, and lodging. So basically whatever expenses we are going to book, we will book the expense under any of these expenses under each of these categories. So in order to quickly add a new category over here, you can click on this add expense source. This will automatically add an expense source to the travel category, and then we can modify it later on. So I'll click on this expense source. As I click on this, you can see that a new expense source has been added over here. Now you can click on this pencil icon and edit the details of this expense source. So let's say I'm editing it to Metro, and then you can set up the budgeted amount for this expense. So let's say the budgeted amount is $1,500. So this expense source is already set. Now if you want to move this expense source to a different category, let's say I want to add a new expense source to meals, you can click on these three dots and place it under the meals section. So now it is under meals, and you can also edit the details then and there. So this is how you can quickly add an expense source to any of these already designated categories. Let me quickly delete this. If you want to add a new category of your own, you can click on this plus sign over here on the right. It will ask you to create a new group altogether. So you can create a new group which will be separate from this travel, meals, and lodging. Or if you want to edit this existing group, you can click on this and can start editing the details over here. If you want to edit any already added existing expense source, you can click on this pencil icon and it can start editing the details over here. So basically for each expense source, we have a budgeted amount set over here, and I've added some budgeted amount for the expenses. Once you have set up these accounts for the travel expenses, we have the expenses which shows the total expenses that you have incurred, the budgeted expense set for that expense, and the percentage of what you have spent on the budgeted expense. So as you can see that for the flight, we have incurred an expense of $2,000, which I'll be explaining in a while underneath here. And I had set a budgeted expense of $1,000. So this has exceeded the budgeted expense, and it is 200% of the budgeted expense. So which is not the ideal scenario. And this is indicated in red, meaning that you have spent more than the budgeted amount. For the breakfast, we had set a budget for $300 and we have incurred $100. So this is within the budgeted amount. That's why this figure is being shown in green. And the percentage of the budgeted expense is 33% reflected over here. So for every expense that you add to different categories, you will find this type of classification, and you'll able to get a one glance view of where your expenses are. Then in the summary section, we can get a complete overview of all the budgeted expense that we had set, the total expense that you have incurred, and the difference in between both. Then we have a percentage, meaning the total expenses divided by budgeted expense of what the percentage is all about. So this 59% is nothing but 3600 divided by 6080, which reflects that we have almost reached to 59% of the budgeted expense that we have set. Now it's time to know how you can start booking the expense for the travel related. Here I have classified the expenses under three different categories, that is the travel, meals, and lodging, with the same principle that we had followed over here. And these are some quick addition buttons over here. So you can simply click on this button to add any specific expense. So let's say I'm under the travel head. I will click on this add travel expense, and it will start adding a new expense over here with the current date that you are in right now. So today is October 6th when we are recording this, and it is adding an expense on October 6th. Then you can start adding the description, the trip info. Trip info is basically what you're planning for the trip. So let's say we had planned for a trip to Paris. So I had written it a trip to Paris. You can write anything and it will start adding this on its own. And if you want to edit this existing detail, you can click on this three dot and you can edit the input over here. So you can select trip to Paris. Then you can select the account of the expense. So basically we had incurred an expense for travel. So what kind of travel expense did you incur? Was it by bus, by metro, by train, or flight? What was it? So you can select, maybe I'm selecting train. Then you can start adding the amount of the expense over here. So let's say I put it as $100. So now an expense of $100 has been booked for the train. And if you go to the expenses summary, you will find that under train, the expense incurred has been $100. Now notice that we have not set any budgeted expense. So once we set the budgeted expense, it will automatically start reflecting the ideal value. So let's say my budgeted expense was $200. So now this will reflect in green. So we have incurred 50% of the budgeted expense related to train for the travel mode of transportation. So this is how you can start adding any expense detail underneath. So you can quickly use these three navigation buttons over here, and it will help you to add an expense over each of these different views. So let's say I want to add a new expense for the lodging expense. I will click on this add lodging expense and it will quickly add a lodging expense over here, and I can start adding the details. So this is how you can utilize this whole template, and you can start to know that where your expenses are standing and how you can plan your expenses with each added expense. So I hope this entire explanation was clear to you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at notionformyuse@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to assist you on this. Thank you.